who would be horrified, shocked, and disgusted would never find out. I was right there, media were there, but he went on in full confidence that he could posture, as he was, for the hunter-trapper lobbyist. That's 1%, fewer in that case, trappers. When Election Day votes are at stake, lawmakers routinely vote against their own values, goals, morals. So impacting legislation is mostly about Election Day math. Now, charities like the Humane Society of the U.S. can lobby some, but they cannot endorse candidates. The real power is in lobbying and political organizations that endorse. Now, the good news is that if you don't have the resources to have a lobbyist, say, in New York with Brian, that you can form an unaffiliated political group and you can endorse candidates based on the voting records that Brian's activity generates, thus strengthening greatly his power in the lawmaking arena, but with no coordination, because that would be not legal, but that would enormously strengthen his already significant abilities. Other issue groups that want to have an impact on legislation don't bother to lobby through charities because that's not where the power is. Whether it's unions, state employee unions, LGBT rights, abortion rights, environmental groups, whatever it is, and the hunters, right? They lobby through political organizations. They don't bother to lobby through charities. Oops, I want to go back. I go back. Thank you. So, like, they are all a part of the fabric of the political life of the jurisdiction and the lawmaking body. They're players. We need to be political players too, and we can. So without a political organization, I'm here to convince, for animals, I'm here to convince you that every election is a tragic waste. So NIFAA's mission is fourfold. First, to convince you that to consider political groups a mandatory component of your advocacy, as it is for every other issue group. To teach advocates how to start and run political organizations for animals through our book, webinars, and workshops. To inspire existing rights and rescue charities to launch affiliated political groups and show you how to do it. And the big picture is to create a broad, true, deep political culture among you. So the animal advocacy generally considers political organizations a mandatory component of our advocacy, and we will support them financially, even though that you don't get a tax deduction as you do as a donation for a charity, and that you'll consider that your obligation, as other interest groups do, and we need professional, staffed political organizations. That's how to be powerful and significant, and there's no reason why we can't do that. Now we are a sleeping giant. So most successful lobbying strategy is based on these facts, that the top factor in how a lawmaker votes on legislation that's controversial, which everything we seem to want to do seems to be controversial, is the top factor is our election day votes at stake. And second, to understand in these cases that the merits are low on the list of factors that determines the bill's fate. And three, that election day votes trump the impact of campaign contributions. It's the perfect word, but you know. Four, that lawmakers know, and think of the hunters and trappers, that even a small politically organized minority group can swing elections. That's why they give them so much power. So a politically organized minority is far more powerful in the lawmaking arena than a politically unorganized majority, which is what we are now. A politically organized minority can win laws that are opposed by the majority, and I keep thinking back to those hunters and trappers. So lawmakers must fear you on election day. So the political group works in four ways. I've just said PG for space. One, it organizes voters, sympathetic voters, into an election day force. It lobbies for legislation to advance its issues and against legislation which would harm it. And Brian is so right that so much of the battle is fighting a constant barrage of bad bills. And three, it endorses candidates And that's where the power is. Because by endorsing a candidate, the lawmaker seeking re-election or his or her opponent knows that your endorsement actually quantifies a number of votes that your group will give to the candidate on election day or give to his or her opponent. Oops, back. You said back was too, what did you say back? All right. And 4, the political group turns out its sympathetic voters on election day to vote for its endorsed candidate. So before casting that vote on that difficult issue, when election day votes are at stake, the lawmaker knows 3 things. First, that the political group is going to inform its constituent member, his or her constituent members, exactly how she voted at every step of the process. And 2, she knows before making that vote that her general voting record on the issue will determine whether the political group endorses her or endorses her opponent. And 3, before casting that vote, the lawmaker knows that the political group will turn out its sympathetic its constituents in her district on election day to vote for its endorsed candidate. Each step in the process produces critical fingerprints that a political group uses to make endorsements. Who introduced a good bill? Who introduced a bad bill? Who introduced a good amendment? Who introduced a bad amendment? Who voted this way? Who voted that way? Who fought against you? Who fought for you? Who in leadership, what lawmakers in leadership positions use their influence to help us or to hurt us? These are the steps the political group watches every step of the process. So the political organization is in fact the perfect one-to-one accountability system, which holds each lawmaker accountable on election day to its informed, concerned constituents who vote. So in casting that vote, the lawmaker doesn't care about the public generally, doesn't want emails and calls from hither and yon. The lawmaker doesn't even care about his own constituents necessarily. In making that difficult decision when election day votes are at stake, the lawmaker pays attention and concern only with his constituents who are concerned about the issue, informed that something that action is being taken or going to be taken in the lawmaking body that the lawmaker is going to be acting on. Constituents, again, not just constituents in general, but only those informed, concerned constituents who vote. And you better believe when you send an email or write a letter or make a phone call to your lawmaker, they will be looking up to see if you are registered to vote, if you are a constituent, and if in fact you voted in the last election. A quick look, just New York City in 2013, the mayoralty, did I skip one again? I need Allie. Yes, I did. Okay. Right. Thank you. All right.
Can we go back?
Yeah.
Go back.
I just know. Okay. Yeah, you're right. But which one are you hitting? I gotta see that you're hitting so I can do it myself. Okay. Thank you. Okay. And now, I think that's as far as I need to go. Right. And now, most advocates don't know their lawmakers' records, or they're getting responses to their letters or emails or calls that sound as if the lawmaker is absolutely supporting us, supporting the letter writer. But in fact, without the accountability system, you don't know what they're really doing. And in reality, they very, very often are not doing what they say they're doing, or they're doing one little nice thing, but they're undermining it with other actions. But there's no accountability system, okay? Advocates don't know, or they don't bother to vote, because I'm going to show you that the majority of people do not vote in most elections, and they may not even be registered to vote, so we need to change that. I'm going to show you how even apparent landslide victories are often won by relatively few votes, to show how easy it is to have power. Think back to the hunters and trappers. I've created a county election, 2013 in New York State, half your, I don't know if it's half, but some of your counties have odd year elections where the turnout is lower, and some have even year elections. So in this particular county council district, the voting eligible population that's U.S. citizens 18 years of age or older, not a convicted felon, anyone who can legally register and vote, because that's our potential universe of support. Turnout of VEP was only 20%, 6,000. Well, that's typical. Some districts it'll be lower than that, some it'll be higher. Now the winner, Walsh, won by a landslide, 66. He beat Lewin 2-1. Oh. So Walsh won 4,000 out of 30,000 potential voters. Lewin won 2,000 out of 30,000 potential voters. The winning margin was only 2,000 out of 30,000 potential voters. Are you coming along with me? And you can translate this, you can think of this as a state, as state house districts. Just to the city for a moment, and Allie's going to pick up on this, in New York City 2013 mayoralty and city council races, very high visibility mayoralty race, right? You'd expect especially high turnout. Even then, the turnout of, and I only have the figure for registered voters, not the whole VEP, those who could register and vote. The turnout of registered voters in that high profile race was only 25%. See how much potential we could have. So, now in this county district, about 80% of VEP are registered, which is a high number, but apparently, I don't know, maybe in New York State you have automatic registration at motor vehicles or something. So of the 30,000 VEP, 24,000 are registered. I'm going to introduce you to the concept of 50% plus one. That's campaign lingo, and it's political group lingo. Campaign strategists and political groups talk about working for their candidate, working toward the 50% plus one, because to win, a candidate must win at least half plus one of all votes cast. So Lewin would have beat Walsh if a political group for animals or another had given the 50% plus one, that the 1,001 voters, reason to have voted for Lewin instead. Again, that's out of 30,000. Or motivated the winning margin plus one, that's 2,001 out of stay-at-home voters to vote for her. And that's our biggest potential pool of votes. And 3, if she had registered the winning margin plus one, 2,001 of the 6,000 new favorable voters. Well, the standard strategy is to work all 3 angles, to get a couple votes here, some there, to put together a serious block of votes. So the political group impacts election day math and is known to do so by changing the minds of what we call prime voters, those few people who show up routinely at the polls, always show up to vote. And 2, to motivate a lot of stay-at-home registered voters. Again, I think that's our biggest pool of potential support. And 3, to register new voters who are favorable to our cause, and to conduct what's called a GOTV, a Get Out the Vote campaign. And most political candidates and strategists and lawmakers will tell you that the most important part of a campaign is its GOTV operation. It's getting those favorable people out to vote, since so many otherwise won't. So power in the lawmaking arena is a numbers game, and that means we must always be recruiting as our #1 activity, as a way of life. We get the name of supporters, their voting address, their email, Twitter, whatever, and we are always carrying voter registration forms. I mean, even people who are used to voting, a lot of them are moving and they haven't re-registered. Allie has brought voter registration forms. Where are they? Okay.
And they're at the table.
And they're in the table too, all right? So always carry voter registration forms. You need to have formal recruiting campaigns, but I pick up people wherever I go. I now live in a smallish town, and there's some hiking trails, and people walk their dogs there. I stop and make conversation. Of course, they love animals, so I sign them up. In my supermarket, the number of women cashiers who have themselves trapped feral cats is astonishing, or apparently, yeah, at least it was to me. I sign them up. Your recruitment as a way of life. Now, the first thing you do when you pick up a new sign-up is you identify them by political district. You do that either online according to their voting address, or you have district maps. So you still have a database sorted by district. And with that information, you can send personalized emails to, say, Allie Feldman, your state senator is so-and-so, his or her phone number, here's his or her phone number, email address. He's threatening to introduce this bad amendment, blah, 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 blah. Contact him immediately to stop that amendment. So personalized, to make it easy as possible. You're not having to fuddle and look around for something on the internet. Sort by political district, and of course you use the same database by district to send out your endorsement choices. So political groups form strong, enduring, symbiotic relationships with political groups over time. The legislator, when one hand washes the other. The legislator, wanting to rely on your endorsement, have that quantity, that number of votes, he can count on come election day. The legislator becomes your champion and your protector, like that lawmaker and leg hold traps. The lawmaker doesn't have to care about animals. We routinely, those of us who lobby, see lawmakers transform into champions for a cause which they really had no interest in once they discover there are election day votes at stake. So they want your votes, they will be your champion and protector. Now, without hyperbole, I can say that it's win-win even if your endorsed candidate loses, as long as you are always seen functioning politically and that you're not a fly-by-night group, you're not going away. You've got to be in for the long haul. Because if you are, the political establishment sees you, takes notice. It knows that a political group for animals, which has such broad bipartisan appeal, has the profound potential to destabilize election day dynamics in the jurisdiction. And candidates will begin seeking your endorsement. So the top factors in a lawmaker's vote, as I've talked at length about election day votes, but the second most important factor is, does my political party leadership care? The building is a political ecosystem in which one cannot exaggerate the significance to the fate of legislation of political party affiliation, political party hierarchy, political party loyalty. We want those lawmakers who have disproportionate power over animal-related legislation to give marching orders to their rank and file of their party to vote with us. We certainly don't want them to give marching orders to the rank and file below them to vote against us. At the very least, we want them to just send the orders down. Hey, vote your district, vote however you want. But remember, all politics is local. That means that every lawmaker, no matter how prestigious, chair of a committee, subcommittee chair, minority leader, majority leader, Senate president, speaker, whomever, that lawmaker is just as vulnerable on election day to his or her own informed, concerned constituents who vote as the lowest ranking lawmaker. So we think strategically as a political group, and we strategically allot time. That means that we are always recruiting in the districts of those lawmakers who have disproportionate power over the fate of our legislation. And we take none of them for granted, because they may support us, on 6 bills, and then something's going to come along that they'll shock us, and not. We're always organizing in their district, one, to keep them on board, and two, to help them. I mean, we've got to protect the lawmakers that help us too. Media protests and petitions, are they good ways to pass strong laws for animals? Ask yourself, do they pass the one-to-one accountability test? The answer is no, except with exceptions of petitions in some cases. I was a journalist, and I used to do with that leg hold trap bill, oh my God, I am so proud. I did a fabulous media campaign, if I do say so myself. But there's no accountability. There's the media, there are the lawmakers doing here, and what's the lawmakers doing? The constituents don't find out what the lawmakers doing. No accountability. Media may be part of a political lobbying strategy, but it is never the political lobbying strategy. Protest, same thing. Not for laws, but if your political group should show up at any protests and use them as a recruitment opportunity, you show up with a clipboard and your head is like this. Okay, watching for new people attending. The whole time, you're not socializing with your friends, you're watching for people showing up, and you run over to them, or don't scare them, but, and make sure you get their name, voting address, email address, Twitter, whatever, and you have your voter registration forms with you. Petitions can be effective, but I think the only ones that I know of that are really effective are those that I really don't have time to go into, they're in the book, but are petitions that you actually carry door to door in the district, made out to the lawmaker. And anyway, we'll talk about that later if there's a chance. Okay, never forget that opposing lawmakers and opposing lobbyists will concede nothing unless they must. Lawmakers now ignore us because they can without fear. And I quote the father of grassroots organizing, Saul Alinsky, who said, "Change comes from power. Power comes from the organization. And last quote, the late U.S. Senator and social justice activist Paul Wellstone, Senator from Minnesota, he said to his people, and I say to you, and I hope you leave with this, dare to imagine what politics can be. Whatever, for animals, whatever you're accomplishing now through a charity can accomplish so much more through a political group. You can help all Brian's good work. Contact me, let me help you. Lewin at NIFAA.org. Take down my cell phone number, 203-901-5355, NIFAA.org. Please, if you're going to order the book, I have a couple here, but please order it through NIFAA.org rather than Amazon. They take all the money. You know, I lose money in both cases, but you know. And look at NIFAA.org for information on the webinars. And gee, do I have lots of time left?
Okay, we have some time. So.
Oh my gosh, all right, I'll talk more. Can I talk about the petition?
About 5 more minutes, Julie, and then I'll take a couple questions from the audience for you.
Wow, see, I was
If
so
you'd like.
good to time. Was I so good to time? You told me 20, so I did 20.
Exciting, it's all just so exciting. It's all right out there.
Oops. All right, here's a politically designed petition, which builds in the accountability. You make the name out to the legislator. Legislator, you know, whoever you are, Patty Keynes, we, your constituents, urge you, name only constituents can sign. You don't let anybody else sign. Street address, that shows her they're their constituents. Email, that shows her you have a way of reporting back to them exactly what she does, and phone number. Then, so you don't wait till you get, and I've done this, like starting in the neighbors of lawmakers. The lawmakers get so upset, and it really scares them because they have spent so much time burnishing their perfect image for their constituents. And imagine with each signer, you're having a conversation. And that signer constituent is learning that lawmaker, why wouldn't she vote against dog chaining? Like, why wouldn't she vote to ban leg hold traps? I don't understand. So she sees with every signer that you're hurting her image. And you don't wait to collect and present this big pile of signatures. You start out, maybe a day, maybe you have 30, maybe you have 50, whatever. And, pardon?
Stay in the mic.
Okay, well, I just loved it, okay. And she's putting me down, okay, putting me in place. Okay, and you don't wait to turn in a big pile. No, you do it, you go a day, you get the 30, you get the whatever, you send them to her, you made copies, of course, and you say, we have just begun our petition campaign, and this is what we did yesterday, and we'll be going out next week, blah, blah, blah. You keep delivering installments, right? You keep delivering, oh my God, they freak out. They freak out. Okay, that is an example of a petition that creates accountability. And I think, should you want to do the may I count your vote or? Huh? I mean, or do I have more time still?
Yeah, let's take a couple questions from the audience. How about
Okay,
that?
all right.
Do we have a couple questions for Julie from the audience before we move on to our next speaker? Yes, and I'll repeat the question so everybody can hear. So if you can direct it towards me, then I'll do it over the mic, okay?
Okay. I'm just wondering, you're talking about creating these alliances that might be attached to charities, et cetera, but then don't you get a lot of splintered alliances within a district? Is there
Are you
Okay, so let me just, for those who can't hear, okay, so the question has to do with creating alliances within a district and whether or not there's tensions that are going to come up, obviously, and there'll be some kind of splintering of different interests, competing interests sometimes, pretty much, is that something?
Yeah,
Okay, so dealing with that, asking Julie for her perspective on that issue.
Let me know if I'm answering it right, okay? Or if that's not what you're asking. All right. Yes, a political group will be another group that can disagree. Right now we know sometimes HSUS disagrees with ASPCA, ASPCA disagrees with Best Friends, whatever, right. And so there's another group. However, there's nothing, can't really get away from that, but the thing is that any of those groups that introduce legislation and fight bad legislation, the political group can decide, what alerts it wants to send out. It can make its own decisions. And it's not going to be hurting anybody because it's the only group that endorses, and it's going to be endorsing Again, if it's not a full-fledged, political group, but only one that endorses based on charities voting, the voting records charities generate. Does that answer your question? Because I don't see it as a problem. I see it still as strengthening.
Well, yes, partly, although, can I do a follow-up to quote the press corps?
Sure.
Sure.
So within a district then, say, if you have a number of...
You mean a district, or do you mean like a jurisdiction, like a lawmaking body?
Oh, yeah, that's what
Okay, okay.
If you have then a number of sort of smaller groups advocating for various animal rights, even if they all agree on the same thing,
Yeah.
Do you think that that's more powerful than maybe trying to get fewer big groups? I'm just curious how it all works.
Well, the problem is that we may like the idea of having one, and you can answer this too, one big group, but it ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen, and it is unfortunate that animal groups fight each other so much and disagree. But the ones, it's sort of like, if you're political and you're recruiting all the time and you're not going away, you can end up having more power than any of the rest of them. So, and plus the hundreds of letters and stuff that Brian's generating, So, I still don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think it's just simply that something that, even there's a risk in some cases, it's got to be done.
Yeah.
But if you're the political ones, you're the most sophisticated. You're the most sophisticated in terms of political change.
Right. Julie, can you just clarify, just make it really clear the distinction between a 501c3 and a C4 and how they might more effectively interact with one another?
Okay, a charity is, the tax code, the IRS tax code is a 501c3. A lobbying organization, which can, as a lesser activity, endorse candidates, is a 501c4. Charities can lobby to a limited amount based on their overall resources. They cannot endorse. Lobbying organizations said lobby, all they want. That's that, and endorsing is all they do. They cannot coordinate directly with campaigns. Political action committees are created solely to electioneer, i.e., endorse and campaign. Lobbying groups can also grassroots organize. Okay, that's what we got to do, organize politically by district. Political action committees can do that, and they endorse, and they can coordinate directly with candidates. They cannot lobby. Which if you really get going, if you're going to lobby too, that means you form affiliates, which is it's very simple. I've got some, ways to do it in the book, but it's very simple, kind of happens overnight. It's a very quick process. But say Brian or other groups is lobbying, they're doing a marvelous job, and you don't have resources to have a lobbyist in Albany, and you just study. You get all his alerts. All these things he wants you to do, which you should do, and you can use that as a political group. You're just one on his list, right? You cannot coordinate with him because that would put HSUS in a vulnerable legal situation. You see what I mean? Because they're not supposed to be endorsing or getting involved with that. So you get their alerts, you pass them out as you do now to anyone you want to, but your political organization, you do it, in a more sophisticated manner. And then at the end of the session or come next election season, you endorse based on whatever votes you find out about from HSUS and possibly any other presence there. Again, if you don't have the resources yourself. Does that answer it better? Or I felt like I sort of said the same thing. Yeah.
Great.
But Brian can't endorse, so we have to protect him we can't expect him to coordinate with us because that would jeopardize Humane Society of the United States' charitable status. We can't do that.
Right. Okay, and just to be clear, Brian, are you a registered lobbyist?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so maybe we can can you just speak to that quickly? I just want people to understand the difference before we move on to we started with the HSUS, but our third speaker is actually going to be talking about a 501c4, and so I want to make sure that everyone in the room understands how these two actually complement one another.
So, and I know Christine Mott gave a fantastic presentation on the specifics of lobbying and 501c3s and C4s about last year. So as a registered lobbyist, I'm registered with the Humane Society of the United States, and I think the threshold with the state is if I do $5,000 a year of lobbying, that includes salary, compensation, then I have to report everyone that I talk to, the bills that I'm lobbying, and this is kept by an organization with the state called JCOPE, and they oversee lobbying efforts across the state. So if I was to go out technically and to hold a meeting with an elected official and then not report that in the lobbying, then I could be held accountable for that. And I think that's a good thing, because I have nothing to hide. I'm out there doing something for animals. We are a 501c3, a not-for-profit organization, and we have to do things that are on the up and up, and we do. And all of the activities of a registered lobbyist are monitored, and you can't go outside of those bounds, and there's certain regulations that one who lobbies. However, I will add, that doesn't mean that folks such as yourselves, animal advocates, that you have to meet these same thresholds and these same standards. If you're out there doing at least $5,000 a year lobbying, I don't think that you would meet that threshold. So everyone here should consider themselves a lobbyist. As I said before, I'm not special, I am not different from anyone else in this room. So anything that I am doing, you could and should be doing as well, and lobbying for animals, because you are a lobbyist as well, although the term that we're talking about is the official legal term for a lobbyist.
Great, thank you. I hope that will help further the conversation for the rest of our time together tonight. I'm going to